Going to be taking the rear driver's side brakes apart on this and replacing the axle seal. So I'm going to walk through that process here today. Going to be taking the rear driver's side brakes apart on this and replacing the axle seal. So I'm going to walk through that process here today. All right, first step, got the jack just supporting the rear differential there. Tire's still on the ground. I like to use this little tool, little angled screwdriver, and get in one of the grooves here, and then just pop it. Do the same thing on the other side. Pop it, and it pops right off. Easiest way I've found to get those off. And then we are, let's see, 13/16 for the lug nuts. Alright, it's basically break all the lug nuts loose while the tire's still touching the ground. Then you can jack it up a little bit more, take the lug nuts the rest of the way off, and remove the tire and wheel. Then I put a jack stand in place here and let the weight of it down so it's actually sitting on the jack stand. And then I like to leave the jack right there, still kind of supporting it too, just in case your jack stand fails for some reason, your jack's still holding it as well. So kind of double covered there. So next thing we're going to do is take these off, slide the axle out. All right, those are 18mm to get those out. I like to keep everything real organized, so my lug nuts go in my center cap there. Got all those bolts up there so nothing gets kicked. You can see I'm working on gravel, so if one of those gets kicked underneath there, they get hard to find. And then this, you might have to pry on it a little bit. Let's see if I can get it here with one hand. There we go. One hand, pull on it, slides out. Your whole axle's going to slide out, whole axle tube here. Now that that's out, next thing we want to do is remove this bolt. And another one back here. Oop. There's that here. That bolt right there. Those are 18mm as well. Right here, those two bolts I just told you to take out hold on this bracket here that your clips stay in, your pads stay in, and your caliper bolts too. So if you're not replacing the rotor here, then you don't have to do that. But if you're doing the rotor or you're doing the axle seal, all of this has to come off. So I'm also going to go ahead and just pull the caliper. We're going to make sure the slide pins are all greased up and everything. That way you guys know how to do that. If you're replacing the caliper, your brake line coming in is also going to have to come off. I'm not doing that. I just installed these. I just bled the brakes. I don't want to have to break into the system again and re-bleed all the brakes and everything. So I'm not going to take the caliper off of the line, but just want to make that clarification there. So to get just the caliper off and leave this bracket, those are a 14mm, and it's this one here and this one here. All right, once you take those little 14mm bolts I showed you on the back, caliper will pop off. Hang it there with a bungee cord or something. Basically, you're just making sure you're not putting a bunch of pressure on this line. You don't want that line to get twisted or kinked or anything like that. So next thing you're going to do is just try to hold on to them a little better than that, but pop the pads out. Just front one. And my bracket's wiggling because I took it loose earlier. It's a little hard to do one-handed, but get in there and just wiggle them loose. Pads come out. And then I'm going to take these big bolts, the 18mm bolts on the back, the rest of the way out. Like I said, I already broke them loose earlier, so. And that bracket's going to come out. that all off, you don't really want to touch where your brake pads ride on your rotor, but you should be able to grab it kind of in the middle here if you need to, around the sides here, and just wiggle it off there. It'll walk right off. You can see now that this whole assembly is loose and wobbly. So basically you're just going to pull that off. There's nothing else really holding it on there. May have to get back here and pry on it a little bit. We'll see. I'm going to have to not record it though, because I'm going to need two hands, I'm sure. I don't think I can wiggle it off with one hand here. Alright, so it is out. I'm going to be honest, it took a lot more prying than I thought it was going to, but got a little pry bar back behind there. I couldn't find anywhere to really pry against other than the e-brake parts, unfortunately, but it didn't hurt anything. So, and once it comes loose, it falls right off. Going to want to keep in mind the orientation of the bearings as they come out. That's how that one came out. Flip it over now. And that is the seal we're trying to get to, right here. So we're going to get that out real quick. This entire metal piece right here. Metal, and then the rubber seal inside there. As you can see, mine's just kind of flopping around. I'm doing, just taking a really small screwdriver, getting it underneath there, tapping it with a hammer until the seal kind of lifts up. You can already see I'm starting to get a gap. Turn it to the next spot, do it again, next spot, do it again, until I've got pretty even gap all the way around here. And then I'm going to go to a thicker screwdriver and do the same thing. There you go, 3 times around. Started with a really small screwdriver, went to a little bit thicker one, and then I actually went to a little kind of a thick chisel there for my last hits on it to pop it out. And you'll see it working its way up until you can actually take it out of there. There it is. And then here's your other bearing. Sitting down in there. This orientation. Alright, with the old the old seal out, you can see there's a lot of, they use some sort of sealant around the outside here. So I'm going to get that all cleaned up. I want to make sure there's no big gouges or anything like that in the metal that would prevent it from sealing up. I'm not going to use any kind of sandpaper or Scotch-Brite or anything like that on here. I'm literally just going to take my fingernail, scrape off all that orange sealant that they put on there, and then try to get it as cleaned up as possible. So before we put that back on, I want to come around and clean up this surface real well. I was able to just wipe off most of the dirt and stuff. Mine does have a couple scratches in it. Might be part of the problem. They were raised a little bit. I could feel them when I ran my fingers over it. So I took really light sandpaper and just got it to where it's smooth now. Don't sand like crazy on it. You don't want to flatten the spot. I mean, I literally spent a second or two knocking that down. Other than that, it looks pretty good around there. Thing to keep in mind as we go back to the Excursion or the truck with this is that there's nothing holding that front bearing, that outer bearing in. So just make sure as you put it back on there that that doesn't move, that doesn't fall out. So I've got that all cleaned up. I just did a little bit of brake clean on a clean rag, and that all came off pretty easy. So next thing we're going to do, just oil this up a little bit, put oil on it, spin it around, make sure oil gets all down in it, and then reinstall it. I got the new seal sitting on there. We're going to put a piece of wood over it so it gives us a nice flat even surface, and then just take a hammer, tap it down in there, nice and easy. Alright, same thing with this. I just took some oil, poured some oil around the outside on here, inside, down in these little holes, and just kind of work the bearing around. And then it's going to go this way, down in it. Bring this over to the vehicle. I actually took the front bearing back out just because it's going to keep falling out, and we can put it in later. So what we want to do, I've kind of got it sitting on there. We want to put a little of our oil back there in the groove. That's why this bag being flexible is nice, or if you have a little canister with a little hose on it would be good too. Put the grease in there, slid that on as far as I can get it by hand, greased up the outer bearing, put the outer bearing back on there. Now we're going back to this part. It has that little part there, goes in the groove right there. Make sure the alignment's good. And then once it sits down in there, remember this is reverse thread. So now it's started kind of holding itself. And take that special axle nut tool off of the ratchet and just kind of by hand get it in. Okay, now it's going to be time for a torque wrench. I like to do as I go through installing new parts like this is as I put them on, I want to spin the assembly and see if I'm getting any noise out of it. Nothing worse than putting it all back together, putting your tire back on, going for your first drive, and you got a bunch of noise. So just a couple lug nuts on there, snug. I didn't crank them down, just snug. And then I'll spin this, make sure I'm not getting any weird noises. If I'm not, I'll pull those lug nuts, put the bracket on, spin it again. Still all good, put the caliper on, pads on, caliper on, spin it again. And then if I'm still all good, then the tire and wheel goes back on. All right, torque this to 60 foot-pounds. You can see as you ratchet it here, you can see that sliding back, closing that gap. We've got it to our 60 number. Now if you are reusing bearings like I am, you're going to back it off 7 clicks. If you're doing new bearings, you're going to back it off 5 clicks. So, trying to put that in there one-handed again. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Next step is going to be putting the axle back in. Clean up this surface here before you do. There's an O-ring there. So clean that surface up, make sure this surface is cleaned up so it mates up real nicely. So that's all cleaned up. Next step is to slide this in, and it may, you can see it doesn't just magically fall right in, so you may have to kind of tilt it up a little bit, tilt it down, move it from one side to the other. Definitely easier with 2 hands. Find that sweet spot where it slides in. Don't bang it around, don't be rough with it. It'll find its way in eventually. All right, so the way that mine found that groove was I pulled down a little bit to have the axle go up a little bit into the hole, not as far as it would go, but just a little. Just pulled down a little bit, and then I was able to slide in. And then kind of same thing, you just kind of have to keep walking it and maybe turn it a little bit. There you go, one little turn and it went in. And you can see the holes don't line up. You can turn, can't turn this, but you can turn this to get those holes to line up again. Thing I always like to do when you get a new rotor, they coat them in oil so they don't rust or anything while they're sitting on a shelf or everything. So I always like to take a little brake cleaner, spray all of the surface down, get all that oil off, use like a blue shop towel or something like that. That's not going to leave a bunch of lint and everything on there, inside and out. Next thing you want to do on this bracket, even if it's brand new, pull these out. Just grab them, twist, pull. Grease up these pins really well. Put some grease down in the hole. I mean, I got this yesterday, and when I pulled these out, I always check them. They were black and crusty, and I mean the grease that was on there wasn't grease anymore, so it would have done absolutely nothing. So I cleaned them all off, put some fresh grease on there, brake part lubricant, grease them all up, stick them back in, make sure they're kind of springing for you. And then you're going to put your clips in, anti-rattle clips as they call them for the pads, and then we're going to mount this bracket back on. Couple spots on the pads that you're going to want to grease up as well on the back. You see this one had the pistons on it, so I can see right where they were. Put a circle around that, little circle around that. Do not get any on the actual pad material. Keep it on the back. And then a little bit right here on these edges will allow it to slide in those brackets a little bit. Again, a very, very little bit. You don't want this getting on the rotor. And then on this other one, you've got kind of right where the 3 legs of the caliper sit. When you hit the brakes, the caliper is going to kind of shift a little bit in there as the pistons come out. So putting the grease on there just allows those 3 legs to be able to slide nicely up and down that without, you know, scratching it or gouging it or anything like that. Here's the orientation of that bracket. Bolt there, bolt there. Again, you can kind of just make sure nothing looks like it's going to drag. I've heard people say that these clips are dragging straight out of the box. You know, just double check everything. Be mindful of stuff like that. Make sure nothing's making contact. Literally just a little film. I don't have gobs of it on there. It's not dripping off or anything like that. And then this one's going to go on the back side. Slide into that bracket. And then we'll do the front side. Kind of hard to do one-handed. Trying to show you guys, but there we go. And push it in there. Alright. One thing to watch before you put the caliper back on. These little boots should be seated down in that bracket. So you can see that one is. This one is not. So if it's not, you're gonna be losing grease out around it. So basically just take your hand, you can push it in, spin it if you need to, push on it while you're kind of spinning it in, get that to seat back down in there. I let the caliper back down, make sure the line is not twisted or anything when you put this on. Pistons go on the inside. And then take one of the little bolts and start it up there to hold it in place. These again are 14 millimeters. You'll see this little piece here, if I can get to it, that little piece there, the reason it has a flat side is it will spin as you tighten this until that flat side comes around and makes contact with the caliper, and then that holds it in place. I'm not showing you very well, but that holds it in place so the nut will tighten up without that part spinning. So if it spins the first couple turns, don't worry about it. Alright, we're reassembled. If you had been doing a new caliper, then you would reconnect this, use the new, there should be a copper washer on each side of that banjo fitting there. They usually give you a new bolt, new washers, use all of those. Again, kind of double check, make sure there's no line's not kinked or twisted or anything like that. And then this is your bleeder valve where you bleed the brakes from. Again, I've already done that, so I'm not going to redo it for this video, but I will put brake bleeding instructions in the description. So if anybody's new to that, those are there all in one place. And yeah, that's pretty much it. We're going to throw the tire and wheel back on and take it for a drive. I'm a liar. With having a leaky axle seal, I want to make sure that this thing is topped off with fluid. So where we do that, it's on the side of the differential here, you can see that nut right there. I'm going to pop that off, check the level, and if it needs any, which I assume it does because it's been leaking, I'll top it off there. And then put the tire and wheel on and go for a drive. Alright, pulled that plug, put a little bit in there, top it off, put the plug back in, cleaned up the differential. That way it's clean right now. There's no leaks or anything on it. So if I see any drips or anything on there in the next week or so, I'll know that that's fresh and I need to maybe tighten that up a little more or something.